I'd like to show you how I make my popular nail files, crystal nail files. I start with these blanks that come from the Czech Republic so that they have great quality. The bottom is etched so the filing part will never wear down. They rinse out very well with just water once the nail dust builds up into it. What I'm doing now is I'm putting a thin coat of white glue and water onto the smooth part of the file so that it gives it a little tooth for the polymer clay to grab onto while I'm decorating it, because otherwise it would want to slide around a little bit. So I'll do a bunch of those up, and now I'm going to use my flower canes. So just an example of um, how I work. The square piece in the left is a cane that I've built to make the petals for each of the petals for the flower. And once I've built a cane up large, I can then reduce it down to have all these different sizes of canes. As you see here, it's really easy to see. Polymer clay, the color is inherent, so as you reduce it down, it keeps the design. So I'm taking a piece of scrap clay and I'm making a channel in it. And I'm going to do this to use as my cutting base for slicing um, the flower pieces. And that's so that it doesn't, the bottom of the cane doesn't go flat. And I've put a little bit of water on there so that it won't stick to the flower canes. And when I'm working with the nail files, I'm working with really small portions of the cane. You can see how tiny those are. They will expand a little bit, as you'll see later, but not a whole lot. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to start cutting really thin slices of these canes. So around the flower part, once I've got the petals and the center and all of that done, I pack the rest of it with a translucent version of the polymer clay so that once this gets laid down onto the background and gets baked, you're not really going to see that. You're just going to see the flowers. And again, these are really thin slices. I'm using a medical tissue blade that's very sharp, very thin, and allows me to cut these really thin slices. So when I'm getting ready to do a batch of nail files, I'll choose the flowers that I want to use for it. And that's what all those little things are on the top. And then I'll slice them all up. So there are all the slices that I've made. And I've put them on a piece of deli paper so that I can move them easily. The background is a blend of blue to green polymer clay. So I'm just going to go through there and I'm using a dental tool. I'm going to pick up um, various sizes and colors of flowers, and I'm just going to kind of mix them in based on what pleases my eye. That piece is about the height of what the nail file, it's a little bit bigger, but what the nail file size is, that I'll eventually end up cutting up into pieces to put onto the files. So these canes, when I build them, I build them fairly large and then I reduce them down. And they'll last for a really long time because they're so small and we're taking such thin slices of them. Some of these flowers I've probably been cutting on for several years. So now I'm putting another piece of parchment paper on top, and what I'm using is a metal drawer pull that has a little bit of a convex to it. And what I'm doing is I'm burnishing in those slices into the clay of the background so that it'll be flat. You won't have any raised bumps or anything. And as I'm doing that, that's stretching out the flower canes a little bit and the background a little bit, which you'll see how that happens in a little bit. And now I'm going to use a coffee tamper that has a nice big flat head on it, and I'm just trying to smooth everything out so that all the little divots that were made while I was rubbing in the clay slices go away, and I now have a flat sheet to work on again. So as I've done that, some of the clay has spread around, and I'm going to go back in again, and I'm going to start putting in slices of flowers where there's still spots. And I'll do this as many times as I need to fill up the sheet. You do want I do want a little bit of overlapping happening with the flowers, but I want to make sure that I've also filled in all of the holes because um, you're going to end up having such a small piece on the file. You want to make sure it's full of design and doesn't have a bunch of holes in it or spaces in it rather. And this is a very meditative thing for me. It can take hours to do, but it's very meditative for me, so I enjoy doing it. So I'm going to go back here and I'm burnishing again. And as I said, I might do this two, three, four times. Really just depends. And I'm separating it from the parchment again so that it'll be nice and loose and ready to work with. It's getting pretty full, but I think I went back and added even a little bit more. So now I'm taking my cutter that I made on my 3D printer and I'm kind of just looking at it to see if I need to add any, fill in any holes. So now I've cut out all of the front pieces out of the floral sheet and I've also cut out background, more of the background blend that I'm going to end up putting on the back. So you can see that wants to move around quite a lot, and that's even with the glue substance on it. So you can imagine if it were slick glass, it'd be a little harder to control. So these, I made the 3D printer printed cutter to fit these so that they fit very nicely. I've got a piece of glazed tile there that I've sprayed some water on and I'm burnishing the clay onto the nail file so that there aren't any holes, I mean any air bubbles, and that it's nice and flat. And now I'm going to pinch the edges together to cover up the side. The glaze tile works really well to give you a nice flat surface. It's similar to using the coffee tamper. It's just that piece is easier for me to handle for this small of an item. And I'm burnishing, burnishing, burnishing again right before I'm going to add a strip of clay to cover up that seam. Sometimes I don't need to. This seam isn't that obvious, but in this case, it's a little messy, so I'm going to go ahead and use a color of clay to trim. And this is my new favorite tool, this dual-bladed um, strip cutter, I guess is what you would call it. I can change it so that it fits exactly the size I want to cover this seam nice and thin. It would be hard to cut that with a blade and a ruler. So I'm going to stretch that over the edge there, make sure it's covered the way I want, and then hopefully it's nice and straight. Tapping it down, trimming off the excess. Then I'm going to go back with my burnisher one more time, make sure everything is nice, no air bubbles, nice and flat. That means I don't have to do a lot of sanding afterwards, which is always a good thing. And now I'm going to trim up the edge to make sure I have a nice sharp edge there, and I know just how far to cut so that it doesn't, so that it's still over the etched part of the glass, so that it won't come off on its own. It won't slip off. And there you go. Then I bake it. Oh, got to put on my name stamp before it goes, just so you know I made it. Okay, then I bake it, and that's the finished product. And those are my popular nail files. Thank you.